I am not really attached to you at all. I am merely deluding myself into the belief that without you, I will not be happy. Anthony DeMello. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. This show is about extracting information on mindfulness, meditation, and personal development. I am on a mission to spread mindfulness awareness, and please join me in this movement. My today's guest is Grace Edmunds. She has over 15 years of dedicated practice in meditation and mindfulness practices. Grace is on the teaching team for the Simple Habit app, as well as at the Beech Institute in West Hartford. She successfully completed studies with the Mindfulness Training Institute and is a certified teacher for Search Inside Yourself, a mindfulness and emotional intelligence program developed at Google with top neuroscientists, business leaders, and mindfulness teachers. Grace has worked with Fortune 500 companies, Ivy League schools, and multinational nonprofits to bring mindfulness practices to an array of communities around the world. She has also taught meditation in Nepal, India, and other countries. Grace, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here with you.
Yeah. I was going through your profile, and you have a lot of experience in mindfulness, meditation, and emotional intelligence. And I'm really excited to cover so many things so that people can learn from mindfulness practices, and they can be at peace, calm, and apply all these practices in their professional and personal life.
That's a beautiful intention.
So you have more than 15 years of experience as a practitioner in mindfulness and meditation, and you have international exposure teaching meditation and mindfulness. Can you please elaborate on your mindfulness journey? How did you get started on this path?
Sure. So, years ago, when I was about 16, I was in high school, and my mom actually was the first one who introduced me to the practice of meditation. She brought me to a class where I learned basic awareness practice, how to follow the breath. And in that moment, I found relief and I liked it. I had all the typical worries of a young high school girl. And in that moment, it felt like everything seemed to kind of lift for me. So that was my first taste of meditation. And I was lucky enough to really have a strong desire to go a little bit deeper. And so I followed the practice into college as well, and simultaneously, I was studying a lot of yoga, and that actually ended up bringing me to India, where I got to dive a little bit deeper into the practice of yoga and even deeper into the practices of meditation and many different styles. And when I returned to the U.S., which this was years ago, but I think it was an interesting moment for me because I had this strong desire to share these practices that I had studied and that I had learned so much from. And I came back and I started teaching yoga, and I found this community of people who were teaching mindfulness in the workplace. And I found that to be so interesting because for me, I hadn't ever worked a corporate job. I hadn't ever really had an aspiration to go on that path. And I just found it fascinating that something that I cared about so deeply and that was so transformative for me was starting to become integrated into the workplace back home. And that kind of connected me with a community called Wisdom 2.0, which I'm sure you've heard of. And they're They do conferences and gatherings, and they've done this for many years. And through getting connected with Wisdom 2.0, I found my first kind of in-depth mindfulness teacher training. And so I'd already studied in many different traditions, but this was my first official mindfulness teacher training. This was the Mindfulness Training Institute out of San Francisco with Mark Coleman and Martin Alward. And that was a year-long training. And it just really opened my eyes to a deeper sense of the practice. This was kind of at the same time when I started to do more longer retreats and silent meditation practice.
So how do you define mindfulness? So if you can please elaborate for the people who may not understand the concept of mindfulness.
Right. Mindfulness is, basically just being able to see clearly what's happening in the present moment. So whether that's something that's going on internally, a body sensation, or your thought processes or emotions, but it's really developing a quality of presence to be able to receive all the information that's with us, and to also have an ability to be with all the sensations that arise as they arise.
And mindfulness is a framework. Under that framework, we can have multiple practices, and meditation is one of those practices. So I want to ask you, when you were in India, what practices or what mindfulness practices did you learn back then?
Yeah, so in terms of mindfulness practices, I was studying a lot of yoga and traditional yogic style of meditation. And, the yogic style of meditation that I was learning was a lot about self-awareness. And that is one of the key developments when we practice mindfulness, is learning more about oneself. And so for me, it was definitely kind of within the yogic tradition was a lot of the practice that I was studying.
And you just mentioned that self-awareness, which plays a very big role in our day-to-day life. Because if there is no awareness, change, any positive change is difficult to come. I want to ask you how we can cultivate self-awareness in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, great question. And a practice indeed. It is a lifelong practice that I think even for me continues to unfold day to day. My number one practice is meditation to develop self-awareness. And the reason why is when we sit in meditation in stillness and in silence, and we direct our awareness within, we get to know ourselves, and we get to notice things that maybe when we're busy at our computer, or when we're stuck on autopilot, or when we're in a reactive state, we don't notice those more subtle experiences.
Yeah. And meditation can be very challenging for a lot of people because sitting quietly, sitting in silence is not easy. So how did you start meditation?
So I started, like I said, when I was very young, and I think that I had a natural inclination to stillness and silence. So it was, I think, a little bit easier for me to start the practice, but it wasn't until I returned from India and I went into the workplace and I started to get a lot of stress and anxiety and overwhelm with the work that I was doing. And, that's when the practice got really fruitful for me, because I was able to dive into a deeper sense of self-awareness through meditation, and also, through body movement practices. And mindfulness, as you said, or meditation rather, it's quite difficult for a lot of people. And, being a meditation teacher, I have a lot of people come up to me and tell me, oh, I can't meditate. My mind is too busy. But there are many different practices.
How would you guide somebody who is not able to meditate on a regular basis? Because continuity is the key. Doing meditation once in a blue moon may not help. And before we get into the weeds of meditation, I would like to ask you, what are we getting out of meditation? Everybody's talking about meditation, but what are we getting out of that?
So we're getting a better understanding of what's going on internally. And with that is a greater capacity to be resilient. So, we're in this moment right now where we're facing a global pandemic, and there's a lot of panic, there's a lot of stress and anxiety. And for me, this is what I practice is for these moments of difficulty. Because when I'm sitting in meditation and something challenging arises, like a difficult emotion, or my mind just won't stop thinking, developing mindfulness, so the ability to be with all of those things, helps me, and it translates directly into the rest of my life. And I'm more able to be agile and to be resilient in times of difficulty. And as far as how to develop mindfulness without practicing meditation, it's certainly possible. When I explained mindfulness early, it's learning how to pay attention in a special way, right? So paying attention on purpose, without judgment. So it's just this clear observation of the present moment, exactly as it is. And so on a practical level, you can do this when you're washing the dishes. You can practice mindfulness when you are walking from your desk to the bathroom.
Is there any other mindfulness practice than meditation and yoga?
Yeah, there's certainly many different ways that you can apply mindfulness. And, just like those examples I was giving, mindfulness is just a way of being. It's a style of awareness. And meditation helps us to cultivate mindfulness.
Yes.
So
and there can be many types of meditation, and you teach meditation in Beech Institute. And you are also associated with Simple Habit app. And in Simple Habit app, you have many types of meditation, including patient meditation, working with your inner critic and building friendships. So this is out of my curiosity why we have so many kinds of meditation.
I mean, think about the human experience, right? If you sit in silence, so much comes up, right? Our thoughts might go crazy. We have all of these complex emotions. Our minds are so creative. They tell us stories about ourselves, about our experience. And so I love to develop meditations that are specific to different aspects of our life, because there's different ways that we can really use our awareness and use the practice of mindfulness to help us illuminate where we need a little extra care, and also spend time on just that, on developing those different qualities of mind and heart.
Yes. How do you apply mindfulness in the stressful situation in your life?
Most good days when I am present, my first step is to take a breath. So let's say I'm in an argument with my husband, and I'm starting to get elevated, and I can feel the blood pumping. Usually what happens is it's called an amygdala hijack. So the amygdala is the animal part of your brain. And when you're stressed out, that's what gets triggered. It starts alarming, basically. And it also governs the fight, flight, or freeze response. And so when you're stressed out, that actually takes over and shuts off different areas of your brain, like the prefrontal cortex, that is in charge of decision making. And so if I am lucky enough in that moment to be able to take a breath, that's actually connecting my prefrontal cortex to my amygdala and helping it to calm down and helping myself to self-regulate. So when I'm feeling stressed out, either getting an email that makes me angry or in an argument with my husband, I try to take a deep breath as number one. And if that works, great. If it doesn't, I take a few more. And if it's possible, I try and remove myself from the situation if I'm really feeling like I'm at the point where I might say something that I regret, or I might do something that doesn't feel aligned with my highest values.
So when you say removing yourself from the situation, do you physically remove yourself from that situation or mentally?
Depends on the situation. I would say physically removing myself is only if I'm feeling really over the top and I want to save the situation. And if it's possible, if I'm in a conversation with my husband, for example, I know that it's a safe place where I can just say, hey, I think I need about 5 minutes to just kind of cool off, and maybe we can come back in a moment and rehash this.
Yeah, and this is the power of communication, where we can communicate with another person. Hey, I need some space right now, but I will get back to this situation when I am calm and relaxed. And
exactly.
This is not, I should say, this is not a big deal to communicate this thing with our loved ones. Let's say if we are having some difficult conversation with a coworker or some stranger or somebody we are not close with, then how do you think we can practice taking a pause or slowing down? Or how can we communicate with that person?
So there's a really great framework that one of my teachers gave. I think it was Mark Coleman and Martin Alward when I was in the Mindfulness Training Institute. And it's called STOP. And it's something that I use, and it's something that I love to offer because it's such a simple acronym. And STOP stands for stop. So if you're feeling frustrated, just stop the conversation for a moment, stop your the rising of the anger, just stop yourself for a moment. The T stands for take a breath. Like I said, this helps to regulate the nervous system. And then the O stands for observe. And observe is basically just looking at the current situation with mindfulness. So let's say, for example, say someone right now who's working from home for the first time ever, their whole company has gone online, and it's really frustrating. And they're on a Zoom conference call with someone else, and this person is just angering them a lot. I would advise them to stop, take a breath, observe. And in that observation, maybe consider the other person. What if that person is feeling upset and anxious about this pandemic? What if they have a loved one who's ill? Considering all of these things can oftentimes help us connect them, help us have more empathy, and help us to calm down a bit in the meantime. Yes. And then just to end the acronym, P is proceed. So then you can, once you've taken those steps, then you can proceed. And it can be done in a very short amount of time, just by taking that breath, observing, and this can be done while someone is also talking, as you're listening to both them and to yourself. So it's a helpful little acronym.
Yeah, you have covered so many things in this STOP framework, and listening to another person and listening to yourself. Both are different things. Sometimes we speak so many words, but we are not aware of what we are speaking. So listening to our own words as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So in my personal case, I would take a pause. I would breathe. I may do some meditation for 1 or 2 minutes. But the communication is a big role here. We need to communicate with another person. Hey, I need some time over here. I will get back to you.
Yeah.
And most of the time I remove myself physically from the situation. I would do something else. And then when I get calmed down, then I come back to the original situation and things things change positively.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have listened to your meditation in one of the Zoom calls, and you were teaching guided meditation in Beech Institute. So what one advice would you recommend to somebody who is struggling with meditation? Or let me rephrase my question here. How should somebody start meditation?
So to start a meditation practice, I always recommend beginning with guided meditations. And in my personal opinion, I think finding a community of meditators is really, really powerful because there's a sense of accountability that's held if you're showing up to a weekly meditation group. And there's also a deeper connection that happens between the teacher and the student. So I always recommend, if you can find a local meditation community, that would be fantastic. And if you want to just start on your own and you're just kind of curious about it, starting with guided meditations is definitely the way to go, because I think for many years of my first starting out of meditation, I would sit in silence and I would just think. And I would think that I was meditating, but really I was just sitting there and thinking. I wasn't really having a structured practice in any sense.
I prefer silent meditation for 20 minutes every day. And silent meditation can be tough for a lot of people because you have so many thoughts. Our mind is racing and we have so many scattered thoughts. So in that silent meditation, I think observing our thoughts and just not attaching with those thoughts will be a key. And with guided meditation, somebody is guiding us through different words, and that will really help for the beginners.
Yes, absolutely. I think when you're sitting in silent meditation and you're new to the practice, and it's like anything, any skill that you're going to learn, playing guitar, learning a language, you're going to stumble around the first couple of times. It's going to feel awkward and maybe even uncomfortable. So having a little bit of guidance is like having a teacher, having a guitar teacher, a foreign language teacher, someone who can guide you to the most skillful way of using your time to practice.
So how can we integrate these mindfulness practices in our day-to-day life? So what would be the framework according to you?
There are countless ways that we can integrate mindfulness practice into our daily life. And, luckily, a lot of the science nowadays has shown that there is a direct link to our seated meditation practice and the rest of our life. But other ways that we can bring mindfulness into our lives is simply by bringing more awareness to what we're doing. That can be, we were talking about having conversations earlier, and that is a really powerful place to bring awareness practice and to bring mindfulness. Because when we're in conversations with someone, there's a lot going on internally for us as we're processing the information. And we might not notice that internal dialogue at the same time. So we might be just wanting to talk and not listen. And we're lacking that self-awareness to know that, okay, maybe I should give this person a chance to speak. And the more we pay attention, the more we can see.
And do you think that level of awareness requires emotional intelligence?
Absolutely. That is emotional intelligence. One of the foundations of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And then the second one after self-awareness is self-management. So the more we are aware of ourselves, so let's say the more I'm aware that I'm talking a lot and I'm not giving space for someone else to share, the more I can self-manage and say, okay, now in this moment, I'm just going to, instead of habitually speaking because I'm really excited or because I'm really passionate, I'm going to intentionally take a moment to pause and see if there's anything that this person wants to share.
Thanks for this great conversation, Grace.
You're welcome. Thank you, Nishant. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this part 1 podcast with Grace. You can follow her work at website www.mindful-grace.com, Instagram @mindful.grace. If you have enjoyed listening to my podcast, please subscribe to the new podcast updates at my website, nishantgarg.me, nishantgarg.me, and please provide your reviews on iTunes, which will really help me to get the guests which are hard to get. So thank you again.